In the previous video, we looked at arrays, and in a coming video, we're going to look at more advanced types of collections. But what happens if you want to print out everything in a collection? Or what happens if you want to do something to every element in a collection? Well, for that we can use a loop, and we can use a particular type of loop called a for each loop. Now next week in topic 5 we'll discuss other types of loops, but today we're just going to have an introduction to loops, and we're going to be talking about for each loops. And we're talking about those this week because they're commonly used with arrays and collections. So you can see I've written this in pseudocode. For those of you who don't know what pseudocode is, it's where we write something that we're going to code, but in simple English instructions. So what we're basically saying is for each element in a collection, do something with that element. The way we would write that in code is for element type, element, then the collection name, and then we would put the body of the loop. So what this means is the element type is the type of element the collection holds. So if the collection holds integers, this element type would be integer. If the collection holds strings, this element type would be string. If the collection holds students, a student, this element type would be student. Let's have a look at this in code because it'll make it easier for you to understand. So these are the arrays we used in the previous video. We had this array of ints, and the array was called numbers, and it was of size 20. So if we wanted to loop through that array and print out every int in that collection, first thing we would do is type for, and then we have brackets. In those brackets we have our element type. So because this array holds ints, the element type is int. Here we put the collection name, so numbers, and this here is a name that I give the element type. So because the array is called numbers, I called this number. So what I'm basically saying is for each int number in numbers, then I'm printing out the number. So I could give this any name I want, but this has to be the collection name, in this case numbers, because that's what the array that we're looping through is called, and this has to be the element type of the collection. Then I assign a name to that element type, like a variable name, that I use in the body of my loop. Let's have a look at another example. We had here an array called names. Its element type is string. So here's my collection name in my for each loop, names, names. Here is my element type, and here is the variable name that I give. So what I'm saying is for each string in names, in the array names, and to use that string I have to give it a name, and I've called it name. I could have given it something else. I could call it string A, for example. But what I'm saying is for each string in the collection, this is my reference to the string. Further down here I had my collection students. I'll just uncomment this that we used. And so in this case, let me just copy this. So I would say and I will give it a better name. I'll just call it some student. So same principle here. Here's my collection name, students. This is the element type of the collection, student. And I would use this reference here. So what I'm saying is for each student in the students collection, so here's the collection name, here is the element type in the collection, here is my reference to each element as I loop through it. And we can print this out. And remember, because this is objects, this is just going to print objects. If we wanted to get something of value, we would have to call a method on it like get first name or get last name. I won't print this one out. This was just as an example. I'll just print out the first two. So this should print out all of the numbers in the array. This should print out all of the strings in this second array. So if I compile this, create a new instance of the object, and it's in the test array method. Okay, so let's just clear this and let's do it again. Okay, so what we can see is, if you remember from the last video, when we create an array and we don't assign values to all of the elements, they are the default value of that data type. So the default value for an int is 0, so this array, when I declare it, is going to be full of zeros. Then I set the element at index 3 to a value of 15. So we can see the element at index 0 is 0, the element at index 1 is 0, the element at index 2 is 0, the element at index 3 is 15, and all of the rests are zeros. So we've printed out every int in this array using a for each loop. Now if we look at these last three here, we had this array, and when we declared it, we initialized it with three values, Alex, David, and Harry. So I said for each string in the collection, I gave the string a reference name and I printed it out. So we can see it printed Alex, David, and Harry. So this will loop for as many elements as there are in the collection. We don't need to tell it how many times to loop. It's going to loop through the collection, printing out every element. And obviously here I could have done something else. I just chose in these examples to print out the element. And that's how we use a for each loop. And that's how we loop through a collection.